We recently covered how to find money easier in Diablo 2. Today we're going to cover one of the ways to spend it: gambling. The reason for the focus on this so much with the upcoming release of Diablo 2 Resurrected is that one of the quality of life improvements was an overhaul to the gambling interface. This, combined with the shared stash, will make gambling sprees much more time efficient, though there are still efficient ways to gamble and inefficient ways. The first step to efficiently gambling, beyond just getting the gold quickly, is reducing the cost, since with the exception of rings and amulets, the cost scales with your character level, as does to some extent the possible rewards. This means getting your hands on two items, the harder one to get being Geed's Charm, the unique Grand Charm, which you can find throughout a good portion of Hell difficulty and rarely from someone like Nightmare Bale, but your best bet is still Hell difficulty. And it can reduce vendor prices, including gambling, by 10 to 15%. It is variable though. The other item you will be looking at is a lot easier, and that is the Edge rune word, easily obtainable in late normal or early nightmare by putting the runes Tyr, Tal, and Am in a bow or crossbow. This also provides a flat minus 15% vendor cost reduction. Generally, people will put this in a low-level bow unless they plan to also use it in a Bramble Rogue, though being as cheap as it is, it's fine to make multiple in the end. Next up is choosing the items you're going to gamble on, and this will vary depending on where in the game you are and what the rest of your resources are looking like. Obviously, gambling for things to fill your gaps in your gear is going to be fine, especially when first starting out while you're fairly resource poor. It's a good way to get rares since you have a 1 in 10 chance of them popping up. That said, as with most things in Diablo 2, it can be broken down a bit more properly. At low levels or on a poor account, a gamble for belt, boot, or glove upgrades is generally going to be a cheap and quick way to nab a rare to fill in some of the common gaps. This is because, unlike weapons, armor, helmets, and shields, you're not going to have the option to pull up a rune word in these slots, and at low levels, the cost of gambling rings and amulets are going to be a bit, well, prohibitive. As you start building up resources though, and getting into the higher levels in the later game, you start opening up more options, and as such can start thinking about gambling in a bit more complex term, namely item levels and item upgrades. For item levels, gambling will result in an item randomly being spawned as if it dropped from a monster of that level, and for gambling, that level will be in a range of 5 levels lower than the player up to 4 levels higher than the player. That means if you're a level 70 character gambling, the item level will be from 65 to 74. This determines a short list of things: what items can be spawned, the likelihood of them being upgraded to exceptional or elite, and the modifiers possible on the item. It can also determine what uniques or sets are possible on the super rare occurrence that you're able to gamble on, and this can be used to find the sweet spot gambles, which vary depending on what your modifier priorities are. Though for most casual gambling, higher will generally be better so long as you can afford it. This item level is also an important factor in using any of the gambled items for crafting later as well, since it is a factor in what items modifiers you can spawn on a crafted item too. For most items, it ends at this: if you're gambling gloves, you're gambling boots or belts, you can pretty much just look at the affix charts and look at the levels and determine what mods you can find on them. That said, as Diablo 2 is apt to do, there are exceptions, and that is because of magic levels, something almost never talked about. But basically, certain items receive a hidden boost to potential affix levels. For example, rings, amulets, staves, orbs, and non-elite wands all get a meager +1 level for determining what modifiers they can have, whereas circlets, coronets, tiaras, and diadems all get increasing amounts of plus levels for affixes, with circlets sitting at +3 and diadems being the peak at +18, meaning they can generate modifiers that are significantly higher than other similar items from the same level character gambling. This is why, for late game gambling at least, circlets and coronets are held in such high regard, along with just the sheer amount of amazing mods they can spawn with anyways. For the sake of your sanity though, remember, circlets will always generate circlets, while coronets can upgrade through the exceptional tiara and the elite diadem, so if you have the option, you usually want to go for coronets. So what do I usually recommend gambling for? For most players, rings, circlets, and coronets. There is also an argument for claws, but the best ones are going to require a bit more luck than the rings and circlets, unless you're prepared to upgrade a low rare or an insanely lucky chance and get GG stats on an elite on the first go. That said, I gamble for a lot more than this, so here's my shopping list. Obviously, as I said, rare rings, circlets, and coronets are going to be on this list at the very top, especially whenever I don't have something specific in mind that I'm gambling for. They're just going to be a really good thing to go for. Next up would be magic rings, amulets, boots, and gloves when I need crafting bases for common crafts, though I usually just do this with my highest level character to guarantee that I have as many affixes possible on the crafted items. And I will also, this is the third one, I will also gamble specific weapons in exceptionally rare cases if I'm looking for something esoteric to work with. But for the most part, I recommend against this because you're not going to get much of a reward from it until you are in exceptionally late game kind of situations. You may be asking at this point, why not gamble for belts for crafting, since, as many of you know, I'm a big proponent of crafting belts for economy equipment options. Simply put, you're going to be burning a lot of gambles on them, getting only normal items, which can be frustrating since they won't be 4x4 belts. You're often better off reloading a standard Hell Merchant until they spawn an exceptional or elite magic belt of the desired type, and using that to craft with. Similar situation goes for elite weapons, since I farm most of my magic berserkers, for example, from Larza. With all that out of the way though, let's knock down a couple myths about gambling before they pop up below. Number 1. Gambled items are determined at the point of clicking to buy, not before. So there isn't some lucky configuration or guaranteed X, Y, or Z on any given screen to guarantee you getting something that you want. Number 2, buying all the items on the screen is no different than buying one in terms of what you have a chance of getting. The game doesn't care that you bought them all. Number 3, Magic Find has absolutely no effect on gambled items. It's not worth bothering with, just equip your Edge and your Geet's Charm and you'll be good. Number 4, all items on the gambling screen show their normal version. Whether they are going to be elite or exceptional is determined when you gamble for it, when you hit that buy button. Number 5, gambling in Act 1 Normal is the same as gambling in Act 5 Hell. The only factor that matters is your character level, not the merchant that you're buying from. Number 6, low-level gambling can be expensive, but effective ways to get low-level sets and uniques for character starting gear, since the base items will be cheaper then and have no risk of upgrading. This is more important for Resurrected due to the quality of life improvements, but it is possible to do in the original version. It just requires reloading the screen a lot more, and generally when you're having to reload the screen a lot more, it becomes less efficient because then you could actually just go out and farm specific enemies with a high level character with a lot of magic find and do it a lot more quickly. And as always, if you have any gambling questions, ask them below, and I would like to give a special thanks to the channel members and patrons for making videos like this possible. It really does help out.